Good afternoon. Welcome to our first webinar of 2016. My name is Matthew Darius. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator, and I'll be moderating today's call. Before we get to our speaker, I'd just like to tell you how you can interact today. There's two different ways that are probably the easiest for you. The first way is to use our chat screen. It's on your GoToWebinar control panel. The other way is the questions screen, which is also on your GoToWebinar control panel. I'd recommend you use that so I can keep track of it. Feel free to type in your question at any time whatsoever for our speakers, and then we'll get those answered for you. At this point, I'd like to introduce Deborah Cunningham, who will tell you a bit about our speakers. Deborah?
Thank you, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Deborah Cunningham. I'm Director of Education and Research for New York State ASBO. Our topic today is the Smart Schools Bond Act and an update from the Office of Educational Management Services. Our speaker is Dr. Christina Coughlin, who is coordinator of the Office of Educational Management Services at the New York State Education Department. And she's been there since February 13, shortly after I vacated the position. And before that, she worked since 2001 with the New York State Division of the Budget in working on the policy side of school finance. She's held graduate internships with then Chairman of the Assembly Education Committee, Steve Sanders, and with the Education Department's Fiscal Analysis and Research Unit. So I think today, there's a lot of questions about these Smart School Bond Act resources and plans that are required. I'm really very eager to hear how many applications have been submitted, what they look like, how the money will flow, how the money should be accounted for, things like that. So with no further ado, let me turn it over to Christina and have her start us off. Christina, welcome.
Hello, this is Christina Coughlin, and I'd like to note that I'm joined by Steve McNally, who's the person in the Ed Management Services Office who's program lead on Smart Schools. We're both here. Let me ask you a question before we get started. Our office has just been called by someone who wants to join the webinar. Is it too late? We'd love to have as many people join as possible.
No, they can join. Have them email me.
Okay, have them email Darius at New York State ASBO.
Yep.
So that would be mdarius at nysasbo.org.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. The more the merrier. All right. Well, I'm very glad to be here, and I'll assume that Steve is too.
Absolutely.
And we have a couple of things to just talk about in terms of updates from the office, and then I'm really hoping we can respond to some questions from folks who are listening in, because I think we've actually learned a lot from the questions we've gotten as we've gone along, and that's helped us clarify the things we don't know yet. And sometimes we discover things we don't know yet as we're going. So please don't hesitate to ask questions as I go through. And at the end, if you have any other thoughts, we'll be happy to take a minute then too and respond as best we can. I'm going to just move forward here. So the first thing is an update on tax cap issues. The update here is that really there aren't any changes to report. I know that people are starting to call the office with questions, and I would encourage people to continue to do so. To the extent we can answer them right away, we do, and otherwise we seek guidance from the executive or the Office of State Controller. And we're putting those up on our website as we go. We don't have too many yet, but we know they're coming. So if there are any updates, please feel free to check out the Office of Educational Management Services website on within the SED website, and you'll see what we know when we know it.
Christina, Deborah, I have a question on the tax cap. When do you anticipate that you'll be releasing the CPI for 2015 for the calculation of the allowable growth factor?
January 20th.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Thank you.
So there's a couple that I've moved to the next slide here, and there's a couple of quick deadlines I want to note. The property tax report card is due to our office April 25th, 2016. That's through SAMS. And then the tax cap filing with OSC is March 1st. We've also just today posted the whole summary of budget deadlines and dates on the Ed Management Services website. So if you've got other questions that some of the other revote dates and things like that, feel free to go there. Okay, here's I think what everybody's waiting for, the Smart Schools Bond Act update. So we have received basically 41 Smart Schools investment plans through the business portal. As you can see from this slide, 27 of them have made them through the initial screen in our office onto program office review, and then they're back in our office getting a look at the fiscal side of it. 3 of them have been submitted more recently and are currently in the program offices. Those would be the offices like educational technology or facilities that those school districts' plans sort of touch on. And we have returned 11 to school districts for revision. What are the, I've got, actually, we've just been joined by one of my staffers in the office, and I was just going to ask her to put the spot on her. Amanda Lolick is also working on this program. Amanda, what are the causes that we've sent those plans back for revision? Don't have to get into any.
A lot of the time it's just really basic things like the application hasn't been filled out correctly or completely. Just not enough detail is what we're going through right now. That we're finding that there's not enough detail about what the purchases are or different models, things like that. We're going to be asking for more information relating to like the cost of what you're purchasing. A lot of basic stuff like that really is what it comes down to.
When we got to the point when we were looking at the budget review piece, we realized we were going to need a little bit more review of detailed around what kind of devices would be purchased, what their capacity would be, how much they were going to cost, because we're doing a reasonability check so that when we forward these plans over to the review board, that they can rest assured that the costs represented in the budgets are reasonable, and then they can just sort of take a look at the plans themselves. So we've actually, we're in the process of amending this.
Yes.
Okay. We're going to make a slight amendment to the plan format to sort of try to get districts to tell us a little bit more detail on those points, and then for districts that had already submitted them, we're reaching out individually to say, hey, can you tell us this, and we'll incorporate that so that the review board can feel comfortable on that scale. So that's one change. And as I know you all know, these are funded through tax-exempt bonds, and we will need to be able to assure the folks, the bond folks in the community there, that these are in fact fully eligible for tax-exempt financing. So we need to have enough detail in place that we can do that.
I have a question from Scott for you.
Yeah.
How do we confirm our status of the plans? How do we confirm our status of the plans where they are in review?
Okay, so at this point, if you haven't heard from us, that's actually good news if your plan's been submitted, because most of the plans that we have received at this point have either been sent back or they're currently under review. I mean, we have 27 that are kind of waiting budget review, and that's that detail place. So the majority of the ones that SED has received have moved through the process pretty well thus far.
But in terms of your actual observing of where you stand in the process, our online system is limited to showing to external folks in the districts that you've either submitted and are in some stage of review inside the department, or you have been unsubmitted back to make changes. And they won't see any change in their status once it hits submitted if it's moving forward until such time as the review board approves it, gives it final approval, and they can start the project.
So we will notify districts once that review board has met, and I've said to many audiences, and some of you may have heard me before on this, that our intent, and this was endorsed by the review board representatives in the various meetings we've had developing this program, is that what SED sends them is fully approvable. So we're going for very high levels of approval from them, but you won't hear from them, and you won't hear any more from us unless we're having questions until the review board's responded. but you will be. There are a few districts that have been contacted by Amanda or Steve on minor issues we're seeing in the plans, and we've talked things over and clarified, and some plans have been unsubmitted for revision. The gist of which is no news is good news at this point, Scott.
You're all set. Okay, we have another question for you. This is from Terry.
Sure.
Can salaries for a technology coordinator be funded as the district does not have one currently?
They cannot be funded with Smart Schools Bond Act funds because that's considered an operating expense, and tax-exempt bonds can't support those.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
No more questions.
Okay, I'll move forward then. So I think I've said this already. We have those 27 plans you saw on the last slide that are in budget review. My staff is going to start reviewing those this week, and and I think we'll move through those pretty quickly. At which point we'll put together a batch of plans for the review board to take a look at. We're hoping that will be either by the end of this month or in early February. And then once we have that first one in place, the guidance that we had issued had said 90 days. I think, given the volume of interest here, we may actually try to set another meeting of the review board sooner than 90 days, and then we'll let them play out. But once this first one gets set, it'll sort of set a foundation for future dates. Some districts have been interested in a waiver for that, the broadband speed requirements. We've actually been working very closely with various entities like the Education Superhighway and the Governor's Broadband Office to get a sense of what's out there in terms of current capacity. And it looks like, from those surveys that a lot of parts of the state are actually in pretty good shape. And we're obviously hoping, and this is from this office speaking, and of course Deborah told you that I had worked at the budget division a long time, and I'm sort of a fan of fiscal prudence. We'd love to see these bond funds go toward major infrastructure investments. So we're hoping that the vast majority of these funds are used to support the filling that gap around broadband speed. Some districts, because of geography, are going to have trouble, and we recognize that, and we didn't want to set up an impossible threshold. So we have, working with those entities, developed a survey around a waiver for the connectivity requirements, and that will be posted very shortly on the Smart Schools website.
We have another question for you.
Yep.
Also from Scott, kind of a follow-up question. What about funding salaries to install infrastructure instead of contracting it out? Can this be funded by the Smart Schools Act?
So we have an FAQ that responds to that on our website. If it's a thing that happens during the normal workday, that's considered something that you would have paid for anyway. But if there's overtime or something like that that you can clearly distinguish out from normal work responsibilities of employees of the school district, we can consider paying for that. So take a look at the FAQ that we have on the website, and then if you have further questions on that, give us a call, but those would be the guidelines.
Christina, I have a question. This is Deborah on the waiver survey.
Mm-hmm.
So is this survey going to go out to all school districts to determine who might be eligible for a waiver for the connectivity requirements?
It's notification about the waiver will go out to districts. I mean, our expectation is that very few, and really very, very few, will be eligible for a waiver and will even need it. So
yeah. Okay.
That will be. I mean, that was kind of the good news of some of those broadband surveys that we were looking at. It will be posted on the Smart Schools website. I think the survey itself, the news of it will be on the Smart Schools website, but the survey itself is going to be in the business portal, right? It's going to be right. Yep. It's going to be in the business portal. Yep. It's going to be right alongside the SSIP in the business portal.
Okay.
This would be a good time to suggest everybody go to the Smart Schools Bond Act website and subscribe to the RSS feed, and that way you'll be notified as soon as we post new things on the site.
All right. So if there are no other questions on this slide, I'll move to the next one. Deborah had wanted to clarify this one. So expenses and reimbursements for smart schools should be recorded as capital expenses. And then one of the other things, and I don't have a clear answer on this yet, but I wanted to let this group know that we're thinking about this, is, you know, we're very aware that capital projects in particular frequently don't come down to the penny of a budget. And
Christina, could you please give out the website address?
Yeah, the smart school. I actually think I have it on the last page, right? It is. Yeah, I think I have it on the last page of the slide presentation. So if you hold on for 1 or 2 more slides, we'll be there and we can talk about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. So we're, as I was saying, we're aware that capital projects, even if they go completely as planned, frequently don't come out to the penny. So we're trying to think about ways to build, you know, at the same time we have an oversight responsibility here, but we also want to build appropriate flexibility into the system. So we're working on that, and I think that may actually be when we get clear answers from the review board on some of the issues that might arise and how we'd handle them. I think that may be a subject for another webinar. But I just want to let this community know that we are working toward getting to a flexible model on that, because we recognize sometimes you open up a wall and you find out that there's some nasty asbestos behind it and your project costs more than you thought, and dealing with those kinds of issues. Those are very much on our mind, and we are spending some time on that.
So Christina, a question. So if you were buying devices, for example, with your Smart Schools Bond Act, those would be expenses that would be recorded as capital expenses. Is that
yes.
right?
Yep, exactly.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question here from Carlos. Regarding classroom learning technology, are Chromebook console licenses not allowed by the Smart Schools Bond Act funding? These are similar to the OS in a Windows-based laptop or a controller for a wireless access point, and therefore should not be considered software and should be eligible. Is there a reason why NYSED will not allow this type of expense that needs to be done together with Chromebook devices?
So my understanding is that that's a separate piece of software, and we can't pay for software. I mean, if you buy an Apple device and it comes with the Apple operating system on it, that's acceptable, or Windows is loaded on a laptop. But if it's something that you have to buy separately, which is my understanding that is, I think that's clearly the kind of thing that's an operating expense, and we can't pay for those. If my understanding is incorrect, I'm happy to understand that. But the basic principle here is that software and salaries and basic maintenance costs and things like that are operating expenses, under the finance laws that we have to work within, and we can't pay for those with the bond funds and have them remain exempt.
Carlos's follow-up to that is that the Chromebook and the Chrome licensing software have to be purchased together for them to work.
Okay, we'll take a look at that one. I mean, yeah. No, the operating system is, I think this is one maybe an email gets sent to the Smart Schools at NYSED.gov website, and we'll think it through and get an answer that we post as an FAQ. Because I know this, obviously machines come these days with operating systems, and those are covered. But I don't know the details of this one in particular well enough to answer here.
Okay, we have one additional question. This is from Anthony. Will there be any process to request that a project that is slated for full review be looked at for the possibility of a streamlined review?
So you'll go through the process that we've outlined with the Office of Facilities Planning, and to a certain extent, that consideration will be made right at the first instance where the facilities project manager takes a look at it. But Carlos assured me that his folks will be taking making every effort they can to expedite these projects, And some of them, like the connectivity ones that involve wiring and stuff like that, aren't heavy projects to the extent that like building new classroom space would be. And those get a sort of an unofficial streamlined review in his office anyway, because he'd like to not delay districts on those kind of projects. So there will be an initial review, streamlined or not, and then once the project comes in, it may get an ordinary review, but that's probably faster than a classroom is.
All right, we have an additional question.
Yep, go ahead.
This is from Bill. If a district is renovating instructional space, classrooms, for STEM as a capital project, are renovation costs, Smart Schools Bond Act eligible, as opposed to FFE needed for new STEM classrooms?
So can you say that again? I think I missed the key point.
If a district is renovating instructional space, their classrooms, for STEM as a capital project, are renovation costs SS eligible, as opposed to FFE needed for new STEM classrooms?
That's a very good question. I think it depends on what the expenses are. If the expenses that are involved would be eligible for Smart Schools if they happened in another space, I think that would be eligible. I don't know whether retrofitting a classroom space in other ways would count. So that's one I'm going to have to clarify with the review board folks.
Okay, that's all the questions
I
we
don't
have.
have any bias against it, but I just want to make sure that that fits within the language of the statute. It's perfectly reasonable, actually, but we'll see. Got anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, and then here's the contacts that I promised you. These are getting a lot of use, so I know people know what they are. Keep them coming. The Smart Schools Bond Act email box is smartschools@nysed.gov. The Office of Ed Management Services is 518-474-6541. And if you Google NYSED Smart Schools, you get to my website real fast.
Okay, at this time, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them right into the question and answer box.
All right. Very good. I think we're done then, huh?
Okay, well, it seems like we got a lot of questions that were raised by the slides, so that was excellent, and thank you all for asking those questions. If there's no more questions, we would just wrap it up and thank Christina and Stephen McNally and Amanda for their information, and we look forward to continuing to keep on top of this program as it rolls out. It is an opportunity for school districts. No deadline means that you can use the funds really wisely, so it'll be interesting to watch how schools actually use it. And in fact, maybe that is another question. If you could, in closing,
sure,
just on how have the proposals been? Have they been good proposals, and what kinds of things? Is there anything innovative that you might want to share that school districts have been proposing that the money be used for?
I think right now we're seeing a lot of plans where school districts kind of knew what they wanted to do, and it wasn't necessarily really new, fancy stuff. It was, closing connectivity gaps and buying devices. So we haven't seen something really razzmatazz and fabulous new yet, but we're seeing really solid proposals. We're happy with what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, you know what?
Other planning that is doing.
Yeah, Amanda's mentioning that we did see some investments in distance learning that we thought were pretty cool. So that's one piece that's kind of new. You know, people putting the space together and their resources together for that. So,
oh, terrific.
Yeah.
It also seems to be expanding the interest in doing classroom Wi-Fi, spreading the educational technology right into the classrooms with the devices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Terrific. Okay, well, thank you all for this great information, and thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we look forward to our next webinar. Matthew, can you remind us what that is?
Yep, it is in like 2 weeks.
But communicating your budget, is that the next one?
I believe so.
January 27th, we're going to have a webinar on the tax cap.
Yep. January 27th, online conversations with practitioners on tax cap issues in 2016. And then on February 1st, we have another online conversations with practitioners on budget communications. And a follow-up to this webinar, we are having an additional Smart Schools Bond Act and facilities planning update with Carl Thurno on February 16th.
Terrific. Thank you all very much.